Welcome to another edition of the Undercovers podcast. Ben's out, so me and Connor will roll the show on as there's a jam-packed show. This is free agency day number 2.
Yep.
Miles Garrett goes back to Cleveland. Max Crosby goes back to Las Vegas. Top free agent targets in many Bill spaces go elsewhere. But positive news, Bills did make tons of restructures and extensions. We'll get into that in a little bit. One including Josh Allen, making him historic $250 million guaranteed. I believe that is the most ever given out in full guarantees to anyone. So Josh wins MVP and he gets paid as respectively so and needed. Well, how are we doing, Connor?
Well, first of all, take notes, Cleveland Browns, because when you want to give a guy that much guaranteed money, make sure that he's actually, good.
Yeah.
They gave away $230 million guaranteed money to a guy that they are not going to see start a game for them this year. Meanwhile, the
Mhm.
Bills have given out all that guaranteed money to a guy that literally is anchoring the franchise for the next 6 years at least. But
At least to
yeah,
2030. I mean,
I'm
he's here forever.
mhm, I'm still in a lot of pain about the Miles Garrett re-signing by Cleveland. That hurt.
It
Most
does.
of most of you guys know that Miles Garrett was my number one idea for the Bills to target in free agency, and they missed him. But as wild as the idea really seems, if you actually take a look at the contract that Cleveland gave Miles Garrett, the Bills were not going to be able to do that. Absolutely
No.
not going to be able to do that. So better in a way that Cleveland gives him that much money because that's apparently what Miles Garrett wanted at the end was the money and not the chance to compete for a Super Bowl with the MVP at quarterback. Which funny enough that we started talking about this because that's going to lead into our first quick take of the night, isn't it, Paul?
It certainly will be because if you know Miles Garrett, he went back to the Cleveland Browns, but Miles Garrett also comes with a whole bunch of draft capital if you trade him away. And while we know the Cleveland Browns are just in cap hell, you know, getting rid of Garrett just continues to add to that, terrible cap situation if you trade him before June 1st. So do you think this was a mistake by Cleveland, bringing back Miles Garrett? Long term, if you would think long term in this, is this a mistake?
Okay. So, absolutely it is. And here's why. The only reason I think that you would have wanted to keep Miles Garrett is if you thought the Cleveland Browns were a single player away from contending for, at minimum, a playoff spot. I want you to go back and take a look at not just the Browns' record last season, because that's easy enough. Go look at a lot of the advanced metrics of the games that they lost. That is not a team that is one player away from being anywhere in contention to win anything. They're frankly lucky that they won the amount of games that they did last season. So, in my opinion, this is a team that needed to blow it up a long time ago. That Deshaun Watson contract absolutely blew up in their faces because he was not the same quarterback that we saw at Houston. They needed to get a fresh start, literally restart. I mean, you've got I think the third overall pick in the draft, either either that or the second. I forget exactly which pick they have in the first round. You have a prime first round pick to add another quarterback to your long list of quarterback failures, but you're going to take the opportunity to get even more draft capital out of our team that really needs a quarterback like you do, and you're going to keep a guy like Miles Garrett in Cleveland to basically do nothing. This man is not winning. The Browns are literally, I don't even want to count how many pieces away they are from actual playoff contention because it's a lot. I mean, sure, they've got talent. If they retain Nick Chubb, that's a huge plus, but that's not a given. He's still a free agent. Wide receivers, they got Jerry Judy. He's honestly a lot better than I think people give him credit for. But outside of those two pieces, they don't really have much else on offense. They starting over with a fresh quarterback, not a really good offensive line. I'd have to look at the metrics again to make sure I'm right. Defensively, they are not good aside from Miles Garrett. They were basically making it was basically Miles Garrett trying to be Josh Allen, and that wasn't going to happen for the Browns. They have no secondary, they have nothing, and they're basically saying, "Oh yeah, Miles Garrett is going to be an anchor for our rebuild for quite a while." Why? You know how many years you probably have left of prime Miles Garrett? The exact amount of time you signed that contract for. Now that it's over, good luck. I just that just doesn't make much sense to me that they would just doesn't make sense to me to sign him to an extension. I feel like all you had to do was trade him and you've got a lot of extra picks because some team is going to buy the farm for Miles Garrett. If you straight up said, "Oh
Oh,
yeah, we're listening to offers." Oh, someone was going to overpay big time. I would have wanted them to take it. Get him off the team, let that team take him and get all those picks to really kick off the rebuild in a good fashion. But now they think that they're a couple of pieces away, so they're going to keep him there and pray that whatever draft pick they get hits. And and even with what I just said, my take will be literally moot point if they wind up drafting a quarterback that has a Jaden Daniels style run, but that's probably not going to happen. It's the Browns.
it's interesting with this Brown situation is because, a lot of things talk in this situation, and the Browns didn't want to trade him. The owner straight out said, "No, we're not trading you." The GM basically said, "No, we're not trading you." And Miles Garrett was stuck. He probably had no really other choice than just take the money, and we'll see how that translates to the field. Translate, and we'll also see how that translate inside the locker room, as this kind of thing, cause a disturbance, inside the locker room. I believe he also has a no trade clause in his contract now, so I believe he can't go anywhere. So he's just stuck in Cleveland for the rest of his career. So they better, figure it out. They better figure it out fast, or just going to have a disgruntled edge rusher in their locker room, just sitting there knowing that he was wanting to be out and you decided not to, and you just gave him the farm for everything. And just it makes it difficult now for Cleveland to do anything. I mean,
Mhm.
they're literally stuck in cap misery forever for at least the next like 6 years with the Deshaun Watson deal.
Oh,
So there's not much more moving with the Browns because the QB class this year is weak. The next year, I don't know about 2026 quarterback class yet, but it might be a little bit before Cleveland, gets their franchise quarterback. And once they had their franchise quarterback, they, ship Baker Mayfield off to the
oh,
seas,
dear
and then
God.
they try to bring in Deshaun Watson. That never worked.
That was never going to work. I will tell you right now that the only reason Deshaun Watson even went to Cleveland is because Cleveland gave him that big lump sum of cash. If they didn't jump in at the 11th hour, he was going to Atlanta. I can tell you that right now. But I got to make it clear that I'm still not basing this take around the salt that Miles Garrett did not come to the Buffalo Bills because I do believe he also had a no trade clause in his last contract, which means that even if the Browns had sent him somewhere that he didn't want to go, he can't just say no, or he could, try to veto that trade. If I remember the whole wording behind no trade clause, because it's awfully funky. But
Yeah,
at
clauses get
at the
weird.
same time, I still am under the impression that not only do I think that it was a mistake for the Browns to actually extend Myles Garrett, I also think it was a mistake that Brandon B didn't try a little harder to package a trade together to get him out of there. Even though at the end of the day, that contract that the Browns gave him, the Bills were never going to give him, ever. It was going to basically be a trade off between, do you want to pay a lot and never see anything past the wild card round in your life, or take a little less money, but we're probably going to a Super Bowl with you here. So that's the trade off, and Myles Garrett chose what he chose. I can't blame him in a way, but it is what it is. We move on to Trey Hendrickson. So that's actually a good segue to the next quick take, which this one's definitely all you, Paul. I gave you this idea, but this one's all you. I had a fairly interesting talk about this one earlier today, and as many of you know, I wanted Javon Holland to sign with the Bills in free agency. He did not. He's now a member of the New York Giants.
Yep.
But the question that I'm going to propose in the quick take for you, Paul, did the New York Giants overpay for Javon Holland? Now, before you answer the question, let me see if I can go back and actually find the details on the contract. Because when I saw it earlier this morning, I said, ain't no way they paid him that much money. Okay, there it is.
3 years, 45.3, which is about
Mm-hmm.
15 a season.
30.3 million of that is guaranteed.
Mhm.
When I saw that earlier this morning, I went, you have got to be kidding me. They paid him that much. But let's see what your take is, Paul. This is your quick take after all.
Well, there's a few things that goes into an overpay. And overpay is, what does the market look like? Are you not paying him what the market is, or are you going over the market? And then the actual pay and production of the overpay type conversation. If you go strictly on production over the last few seasons. He's been a little bit inconsistent over the last 2 years. He has, I believe, had a four different defensive coordinators over his last like 4 years or something like that. So he has some transition within, schemes and defenses he had to play in. But that hasn't allowed him from getting 5 interceptions, 5 forced fumbles, 219 tackles, and 17 pass breakups from his first 2 seasons, and then the other stats were from the in totality of his career in Miami. Justin Reed goes for about 10.5 million a year. If you look at Byam, he goes for 15 a year, and then you go Xavier McKinney, who Javon Holland is replacing, went for 16.7 a year. So you look at the market. The market says Holland is being paid what he's supposed to be paid. He's right around the 15 million a year mark, and that's what the market is saying. The position he should be paid. He's also 25 years old. He goes into a New York secondary that is just was bad last year. They were you know, they were 31st in opposing's completion percentage. Teams were completing almost 70% of their passes against this giant secondary, and then they gave up 17.7 yards per pass last season, which was second last in the NFL. So he goes into a giant secondary that is bad, but he also goes to a giant secondary that is growing that is growing to be one of the better ones in the NFL with who they drafted last year in Nubin, who they're bringing in this year with the Debo, and their defensive coordinator, who is we all know is well structured and is a pretty decent at what he does.
Wait,
So the market
Paul,
says
stop.
he's not
Paul,
overpaid, but
Paul, wait,
production.
wait, Paul, hold it. We just got Bills news, like right now.
All right,
Hold on. Reggie Gilliam just re-signed with the Bills.
there we go.
Fullback Reggie Gilliam and the Bills have agreed to terms on a one-year deal per Mike Garofalo. I don't even remember how you say his name.
Garofalo.
I don't even know. Okay, he gets $2 million on a one-year deal to return to the Bills.
You just said 2 billion.
Wait, what did I just say? Did I say two? Wait, did I say 2 billion? Yeah, we gave
Yes.
him $2 billion. No, 2 million. If you thought that's what I said, yeah, $2 billion.
$2 billion for 1 year for a nice
Good
fullback.
lord, what an overpay. Well,
Fullbacks are important in this league.
yeah, they really are, and a lot of
Maybe
people
just
don't
not that
understand that.
important. Not that important.
I will say this: I saw a subsection of people that wanted Kyle Juszczyk to be a Bill. You were not
I
paying
did
Kyle
see that.
Juszczyk 1 million. You were not paying him that. He
Uh-uh.
was going to go for a lot more. So
Oh,
I'm
he's
very
probably going at
happy.
least double 2 million.
Yep,
He's probably
I
going for
am.
at least four.
I'm so very happy that we've re-signed Reggie Gilliam.
I mean, speaking of that, Ty Johnson just about an hour before Reggie Gilliam gets signed, and I think that's a perfect way to go into our Bills free agency talk. And with Ty Johnson coming back, which was if you go watch last episode, we talked about why you should bring Ty Johnson back. Just what he brings to the Bills offense. But before all, just Ty Johnson and Reggie Gilliam, it goes back to the importance of draft and retain. Josh Allen, Khalil Shakir, Terrell Bernard, draft, and you retain them on all, you could say, team friendly deals.
Hmm.
While you look at Josh Allen's 250 fully guaranteed deal, and which is one of the historic contracts in this league, you would think, well, how is that team friendly? But if you break it down, that's as team friendly as you can get to pay Josh Allen. So, how do you think drafting wise, you draft and you retain, how do you think that is important to your overall building of your football team?
Very, absolutely, very important. Actually, I'd argue it's better to do that. I'd argue it's actually a better sustainable way to actually keep a team together by just drafting, keeping your homegrown talent over going out and getting people through free agency. There are exceptions, obviously, but the fact that the Bills are going this route, they're keeping their main players of focus. One still, well, actually, one I assume everybody's still waiting on, Christian Benford. The other one to be determined is James Cook. So the fact that they're doing what they are and they're keeping a lot of these in-house players is the best way to keep building a team going forward. So that's what we need to do with Keon Coleman. Whoever we draft this year in the first round, second round, wherever, just keep as many of them together as possible because that's really the best way to build a team. That's a, you see a lot of teams win Super Bowls with a lot of homegrown talent, and that's realistically the best way to do it. Because let's be honest, you can't just go out there and sign a ton of free agents because one wrong signing in terms of scheme fit or culture fit and all that work gone. For example, I'm trying to think of one right off the top of my head that really, really ruined a team going forward. there's nothing I can think of right now in terms of culture fit. I know I could think of Le'Veon Bell, but he absolutely just tanked after he signed with the Jets. But the Jets, they always tend to bring in a bunch of free agents every single year, and they never fit, which is one reason why they just seem to always never have success, is because they keep bringing these guys in that keep changing the culture up, keep changing the scheme up. Nothing ever sticks, nothing works. Therefore, your drafting doesn't work as well because no one has time to develop. It's like,
Mm.
put it this way too. They signed Justin Fields, right?
Yep.
Then why on earth did you spend a draft pick last year on Jordan Travis? If you're really going to just go out there and you're going to sign a young guy to be your quarterback, and I assume that because they went with Justin Fields, they're thinking of him not as a bridge, but potentially a future quarterback, for a long time, then why have Jordan Travis? Just trade him for a late pick at this point. Not that I'm advocating for the Bills to pick him up for a seventh. I mean, let's just be completely real. Why do you have him? All that home,
Sure.
you drafted him, and yet you're not going to use him. Your homegrown talent is just not going to be there. So it's puzzling,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Drafting and retaining is one of the more important parts of building your football team. You can't just always, shell out money and overpay for players every free agent cycle. You're going to have to go into the draft, first round, second round, or especially, in the fifth and sixth round. You have to draft well. And I, Bean has been, shamed on for not drafting well early enough in the rounds and in round ones, round two. But Brandon Bean, you go rounds 3, 4, 5, 6. He has some hidden talent. Christian Benford would be the perfect example if the Bills will retain him, and I expect that extension is going to come soon. That would be the best example here of drafting and retaining and finding these players within the draft so you can continue to build forward. Another great example of this is Khalil Shakir. You know, maybe 2 years ago, you would think Khalil Shakir is probably your wide receiver three, maybe your wide receiver four in your team because he was a fifth round pick out of Boise State. He had to develop into the Bills' wide receiver run because that's what he's currently is right now on the Bills roster. You could maybe argue Josh Palmer has a potential shot at that, but I don't think so. I think it's probably Shakir, filter in Kincaid and Coleman. That's kind of like your core three at the wide receiver position,
Mhm.
but draft and retain. Something that Bean has kind of spoken about over the last few years is that we have to draft better because we're always tight up against the cap, and he knows that. And we're still kind of the Bills right now are still tight up against the cap. So in order to beat the cap, you have to draft and retain. And draft and retain is extending. Extending gives you some extra money to go elsewhere. And I think that's something that the Bills have done really well over the last few years. And I think one of the, if you go back to another example, this is probably the best, is Josh Allen, your franchise quarterback, MVP. You draft your franchise quarterback that allows you to draft and retain in other positions. So one of the best things that Bean has done is exactly that. But now the one flaw I would think with Bean is right now is with the money that you have, are you bringing in other impactful players? We'll get to that in a little bit as when we grade some of these free agent moves or just the free agents what had the Bills have done overall in the last little bit,
Well, we won't have much to
grading the
grade.
offseason. But let's go into Josh Palmer because the Bills signed Josh Palmer yesterday. I forget the his contract. I think it was 3 years. He was a 3-year contract for Josh Palmer, and he's a really good key addition to the Buffalo Bills. I'm gonna ask you this: does Josh Palmer improve the Bills' wide receiver room?
Yes, absolutely. I don't even have to hesitate on that one. Yes. The thing that makes Josh Palmer an incredible signing is because Josh Palmer is a separator. You look at a lot of the games that he played with the Chargers, that was the best trait he showed on the field at all times. He could separate easily, and that is exactly what the Bills need in this current offense. Josh Palmer, actually, I'll just go right to the tweet by at the Bills guys, right near to the time it happened. Josh Palmer's proven ability to get open versus man while also not being a guy who will demand 100 plus targets perfectly meshes with the Bills receiver room. A plus addition, in my opinion. And yes, I would agree to the entirety of that statement. That is 100% the best thing that could come out of that signing. Josh Palmer getting that separation, being that man that Josh Allen can reliably hit down the middle is going to change the look of the entire offense. Because now you not only have to worry about Shakir getting open, but you got to worry about Josh Palmer actually separating effectively and getting the ball and taking it over. Like that's it was a beautiful signing when I first heard of it. Low key best part, now we can finally have a guy to somehow take the number 5 off of Kyer Elam, and now we have someone who will actually wear it properly.
Yeah. You
Get
look
the
at
get
Josh
that aura.
Palmer and what he you look at Josh Palmer and what he brings to the Bills. It's one, like you said, Connor, separation. He's one of the better separators in the game right now, and he did that
It's what
greatly
we need.
last year for the Chargers. But he also wins at the line. He had a 19.7% win rate last year. That is 6.9% higher than any other wide receiver in the Bills last season. Just think of that. The Bills last year, the highest was Amari Cooper, who's not on this team right now. So you have a Bills player in Amari Cooper, who was on the Bills in 2024, not on your roster now in free agency. He was the highest win rate guy for the Bills last year. Now you bring in Josh Palmer, who wasn't even on the Bills last season, combines for a 6.9% more for win rate than any of the Bills currently on the roster. That's Shakir, Coleman, Kincaid, Samuel. List any receiver currently on the Bills 2025 roster that is way less than what Josh Palmer win rate was last year. And that is important to your team
Mhm.
in the wide receiver room. Cool. Separation is great, but how do you create separation? You have to win at the line first. So if you don't win at the line, you're not going to be able to create good separation. And that is one of the things with Josh Palmer that will help the Bills offense improve and will help Josh Allen become a better quarterback because he doesn't always have to throw in tight windows. And he's that guy that's going to get downfield, vertical stretch guy, inside, outside. He just wins at the line and gets separation, and Josh doesn't have to throw into tight windows when he's throwing to Josh Palmer. And that will elevate Palmer's game, and that will also elevate Josh's game in 2025. And it's perfect. And he
Mhm.
fits the system. And he fits everything that we have wanted in a receiver in this team, in this role.
Mhm.
It goes even bigger than that. He's probably not even going to be wide receiver 1 on this roster. He's probably not
Oh,
going to be
no.
wide receiver 2 on the roster. You
Depends who you bring
include
back.
Dalton Kincaid. He's probably wide receiver 3 again on this roster. So he probably falls into the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 range on on the Bills' active roster. And that's just another weapon inside the Joe Brady arsenal that he can use. And that's really good when you have complement of a complementary piece to fit the mold of your team, and that fits the everyone eats mantra, which was
Mhm.
the entirety of last year, and I think is going to be the same exact message heading into this year. But the Bills also made another signing on Monday, and they bring in Swiss Army knife
Oh,
Michael
man.
Hochit. Michael Hochit could play almost everywhere that you can imagine. Edge, defensive tackle, linebacker. You could probably throw him at corner at sometimes because he just drops into coverage like a maniac. How does Michael Hochit help the Bills defense?
Oh, man. When I tell you I was actually a lot more excited about this signing than the Josh Palmer one, that's not an understatement. I watched so many Rams games last year, and I saw this guy play quite a bit. He is absolutely incredible because you could literally plug him in almost anywhere on the defensive line, and he will play the position. Like, there's actually a clip where he clamps DK Metcalf,
Yeah,
and he
that's
does not
insane.
get anywhere. I mean, this guy is going to be incredible for the Bills. Now, I feel like what they'll probably wind up doing is they'll use him on a rotational basis. He's not going to be a guy that's just constantly on the field because that's how he was with the Rams. He was more of a rotational player. You really only saw him on like third down, stuff like that, but you also saw him everywhere. I don't remember exactly who said it, but I know it was on Twitter somewhere. Someone actually called him a chameleon on a defense. And I was like, that is the best way to describe it that I've never heard before because you have no idea where this guy's going to line up. He's going to either line up right on the line, he could line up in the linebacker role, he could line up literally covering the slot receiver of someone someone's slot receiver. So, it's incredible to think about adding Michael Hoyt or however you say his name to this team because I watched probably every Rams game starting from their first Seahawks game last year. And
Mhm,
when I say I got a lot of time watching his actual film, not looking at stats, yeah, this is a A+ signing, at least the way I see it. I don't know
mhm.
how anybody else does, but me personally, I think this was an incredible signing. We got really fortunate that we were able to pick him up when we did. By the way, it
And it's
just
not a
happened.
bad contract either. It's a
Oh, yeah.
really good contract.
Oh, yeah. That's
And
also true.
Bean doesn't overpay for players, and that's very noticeable over this offseason where you're seeing guys getting maybe a little bit more than what their actual market value says. And there's pros and cons to overpaying a guy, and then there's pros and cons to that. Like the pro is if you overpay for a player, yeah, you have him on your roster and you have a great player in your roster, but is he worth what he's actually giving you? And that's the con side part of it. It's like if the great example of this would be probably is DK Metcalf as he went to the
Oh,
Steelers.
boy.
He gets this monster contract. What he does on the field is worth 30 million. But is it worth 30 million over the next few years? Most likely not. And that's the con side part of overpaying for a player is that with DK Metcalf, he's still getting paid what he was going to get in his final year in Seattle. And then in his age 28, 29, 30 season is perfect for 30 million a year. But is his age 31, 32 years, 31, 32 year season perfect for 30 million a year? Most likely not. And so then you would have to spread that money continue continue to go further down the line as he gets older. Hochit, Palmer, no overpays. in any of the Bills' contracts so far. And Hojit brings upsides, size. He's versatile. He could just play every position known to man on defense, linebacker, defensive tackle. Uh, he drops into coverage as like a guy that plays up against DK Metcalf. He's perfect for what this role of the Bills is, and we need versatile players. But when he's on the line, he has an 11.4 pressure rate over the last 2 seasons. He gets to the quarterback. That's what the Bills need. They need people to get to the quarterback. And what he did in the wild card game, there's a graph out there with EPAs and all that, and he was in the more of the upper right quadrant of the pressure rates in the wild card round, which is the upper right quadrant in this graph would be excellent pressure rate in the wild card round, and he was in that part of the graph where he was winning at the line in playoff games. Hence, what the Bills need. All right, let's get uh into our final portion of this, grading the the grading the Bills free agent moves and our top free agent targets as we close up the show. Let's grade the Bills off season so far. What would you grade Brandon Beane's moves on a letter scale?
Let's see. Are we going to get nuanced here? Are we going to allow for minuses and pluses, or are you just going to say that it has to be one single letter? Because that will change how I
You
say
can
this.
do it as you please. If you want to go A minus, B minus, sure. If you want to give solid letters, that also works. I mean, it's a letter grade system. You can choose.
A minus.
Okay.
I actively think that we've got an A minus free agency right now. And the only reason I'm not saying a solid A is because it just feels very underwhelming right now. And I don't mean to say it like I wish they would have done something crazy like we've seen a few teams do. I'm just thinking that the reason that it's an A minus is that we have retained all that homegrown talent for less than what was predicted. If you look at Greg Thompson's tweets, Greg from Cover One, he explains in depth how the Bills were able to actually manage to sign our own players to contracts that are actually under what was expected. So that is probably the best part about the entire thing. And that's also why the grade is an A. Now, the reason it's an A minus, I feel like there's some moves that they probably could have made that they should have looked at a little more. I'm not really talking about Miles Garrett. I'm not talking about anything, crazy unrealistic. I'm actually talking about options that may have been a little more realistic at positions of need. Javon Holland is a circle back to that, even though, like I said, the Bills were never going to be able to pay Javon Holland what the Giants did. I still think that, and I don't know, I wasn't actually there. Maybe the Bills did a little bit more due diligence than I'm guessing they did on some of the key positions. But outside of that, it just feels like maybe there could have been more done in a few other areas. So A minus for being able to keep a majority of the players that we needed to keep here in Buffalo signed for what could practically be considered a premium. All right, Paul, let's hear
A
yours.
minus is a good scale because I think with the Allen restructure, Bernard extension, Shakir extension, some of these other extensions is worthy of an A minus. I think you put in Josh Palmer, for example, in that that sign-in was really good, and have high expectations for Josh Palmer going forward over the next 3 years. I'm interested in Hojit because he has high upside. He's versatile. He's just not good at one particular position. Is that's the reason why I'm kind of skeptical a little bit, is that I would rather have a guy that's kind of good at what he does. And, on the defensive line, if you could play, defensive end, or you could switch over to defensive tackle, if those are the two things you're good at, that's kind of what I want on the defensive line, is that you're kind of strictly on the line and you're just continuing to generate pressure. Hoychit, he can drop into coverage. He can, you know, make this Bills defense more flexible in what they do. They can run different types of systems. They can run a 3-4. They could run a 4-3. They could go into several different packages and schemes, and that what Hoychit allows you to do. But kind of like you said, I was kind of expecting a little bit more when the Bills freed up about $21 million in available cap space. Josh Palmer plus somebody else, not named Hoychit, but it's okay for right now because there's still plenty of targets available for the Bills on the defensive line.
Mhm.
One is Aziz Ojolari,
Oh,
and
please.
several other names. Zadarius Smith is also on the market, so a solid A- works, but I'd probably just knock it down to a B for me, just because I was expecting a little bit more out of this. The Bills had all these guys that they could pay for on the open market. I mean, DJ Reed,
Oh,
etc.
God.
Kadarius Ward, ex- just those are just two guys that first come to mind when targeting players, is that there was players the on the negotiating table that the Bills could have paid for. Josh Sweat could
There are
have
players
paid
on
for
this
him,
roster.
and then he doesn't, and then the Bills don't go get a Josh Sweat. So I was
Now,
expecting a
now
little bit
hang on.
more.
Hang on. Let me backtrack you a little bit there, Paul. I know that, like me, you were probably expecting a little bit more, but remember, just because they're not addressing a position in free agency does not mean that they're not thinking about it. The way
Oh
that
yeah,
I
sure,
see
they
it,
can think about it.
I feel like they brought in Hoyt, however you pronounce his last name, to be that kind of guy that can transition between positions, consistently, like he was able to do at LA. I think what they're doing, I think the Josh Palmer signing at wide receiver is probably more telling of how they plan to approach free agency. Maybe they're going to beef up the offense there and they're going to spend the majority of the early draft doing nothing but defense, which that is exactly what they need to do. And lately, I've been chatting with other Bills fans. Yeah, there's, one in particular, you know who I'm talking about, Paul. And she kind of showed me a little bit more of the Kenneth Grant tape. And that's kind of what I think the Bills ought to do at this point. Last year, we were all hyped about maybe Bean is going to try to use some of our picks to trade up for Brian Thomas Jr. Well, now this time, let's use some of those picks and trade up for a guy like Kenneth Grant, who will absolutely completely stuff an opposing offensive lineman before they even get set. What I would love to see, right, is I don't know if you saw this, but this is a highlight from last year that I remember that the Rams were able to pull off against the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles during their regular season game when Jared Verse ran through one of the best tackles, I think tackle, maybe guard, I don't remember, in the game, Jordan Mailata. He absolutely ran through him like he wasn't even there. I mean, that was probably the best physical display I think I've ever seen out of a rookie pass rusher in a long time. I would absolutely just die happy if we drafted Kenneth Grant somehow, game on the line against a team like the Chiefs, and he does that to one of their offensive linemen. That would just be the most beautiful sight on the planet. So that's kind of why you can't really think too much about, we haven't really done enough because Bean might have a plan to address a different type of position more in the draft as opposed to free
Mhm.
agency. I also know from my experience that for 13 years, I never cared about free agency because I knew my team for 13 years was never going to do anything in free agency. They were going to wait until the draft, and usually it panned out quite well. A lot of the later picks that I ever saw, sixth round, fifth, sixth, seventh rounders, turned out to be players that are going to be Hall of Famers one day. Biggest one's Antonio Brown. I'm pretty sure he was like a sixth round pick back in 2010, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Like, there's no doubt about it. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He has a Super Bowl ring to his credit and looked like one of the best wide receivers we'd seen in a long time. And that was a late round pick. And speak of late round picks, you remember Khalil Shakir was a late round pick.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not going to compare the two, but what I think's actually interesting is you remember earlier today, like probably not even a couple hours ago, they made the announcement that the Bills received, I think, 4 additional compensation picks.
They
That's
have, yep.
Yeah, it's tied for the most that anyone in the league has received. So now the Bills have 10 draft picks this year. And a lot of those compensation picks, they're later in the draft. If I remember correctly, a lot of Bean's best players taken have been in the later rounds. Shakir was one of them. So I'm kind of thinking maybe Bean can keep that momentum going in a way and make a huge splash on day one. Trade up and get that absolute stuffer that you need on the defensive line to make every quarterback you go up against face a literal nightmare. So that's kind of my opinion on it. I
Mhm.
don't think they've needed to do anything crazy, in free agency. I actually really like what they've done. That's, I think, the key difference between our grades.
All right, let's wrap up the show with one last thing here is there's still free agents on the market. Oh, excuse me. Who are
You got a
you
list?
eyeing? I got a list. Let's see. Let me pull up the NFL Network had a post not too long ago.
Yes. Let's actually pull up the entire list because there's some
They had a
interesting names
list.
still left. Pull up
They
that
had a
list,
list
Paul.
of player. Okay, here I got it. Here's the players remaining on the NFL free agents top 100 big board include Asante Samuel Jr., Amari
What?
Cooper. Go to the next page. Thank you. Cam Robinson,
Ooh.
Stephon Diggs, Tevin Jenkins, Javon Hargrave, Levi Onozurike, Evan Ingram, Calais Campbell, Josh Myers, Kevin Zeitler, Ojolari, Demarcus Lawrence. Those round out kind of the top 50. Do you want some more names?
Well, yeah. I
Darius
mean,
Smith is there. Dante Flower, Joey Bosa. Let's see. Those are the defensive lines there.
oh God, if I see anyone
Justin
talking about,
Simmons is still available. If you want to bring back Tyrod Dotson, you still could. On the offensive line here, here is safety Julian Blackman. That kind of like rounds out the top 100 there of like trying to grab Bill's needs. DJ Jones is still out there if that piques your interest.
hmm, there's a lot of names on this list that actually pique my interest.
Maybe
Let me
say
see.
name maybe two of them that pique your interest the most, and maybe why the Bills should sign them.
All right. So I'm going to give three, actually. I'm going to give an
Okay,
offensive
go
player,
for it.
I'm going to give a defensive player, and then I'm going to give a player that would absolutely break the universe that I would literally want to see the Bills sign just because chaos. So, first and foremost, let me start off by saying that anybody that wants Joey Bosa on the Bills needs to go back, turn around, and forget about it. That man is a Miami Dolphin because he is always injured. He has only played 2 healthy seasons in his entire career. Period. I don't want that man anywhere near Buffalo. Point blank. Period. I don't want it. Keep him away from this town. So that's that's the caveat. Like I would love to have an edge rusher come to us in free agency, but not Joey Bosa. He is far too injured. That's why I still am waiting on the eventual Adam Schefter post that says the Miami Dolphins have signed Joey Bosa because I'll be like, that is Chris Greer for you. He didn't learn from Teron Armstead, and now he's going to do the same thing with Joey Bosa. But I will start off with one player that still intrigues me on the defensive side of the ball, Calais Campbell. I want Calais Campbell to sign with the Bills. That would be an incredibly nice player to have on this team because he was already, they were already thinking about not, when Miami had him last year, they were like, maybe we'll let him go after after free agency or not free agency, God bless, right before the playoffs, if you remember that, because Calais Campbell was like, I kind of want to sign with a contender if Miami doesn't make the playoffs, but that didn't happen. They kept him, and now he's a free agent. I would love to see him join the Bills. That would be just an incredible signing because you've got a guy who's got a vet presence and can actually still has something left in the tank despite being I think he's a little on the older side. I know he is. He's been around for
Calais
so
Campbell, he's
long.
38.
Yeah, he's been around for a while. I remember when he was part of that Jacksonville defense that got them to the AFC Championship game in 17. It should have got them to the Super Bowl. Miles Jack was down. You can't change my mind. But Calais Campbell is probably my number one choice if the Bills decide they want to go the route of improving the team on the defensive line in free agency and they don't focus on it in the draft. In that case, definitely give me Calais Campbell. But on the offensive side of the ball, I've got another one for you. And I think this one's actually, I don't know. I think this is going to be a one that might cause some people to scratch their heads. Maybe it's going to be one that's going to make you scratch your head, Paul. Are you ready for it?
Go for it.
Amari Cooper. I want the Bills to bring him back. I
We
think
had this discussion last week.
I know, and I'm about to bring it back up, and I'm going to tell you two reasons why. First reason really doesn't matter as much. It makes the trade that you made to get Amari Cooper last year actually worthwhile. But two, Amari Cooper changed the entire complexion of the Bills' offense. You could see defenses planning a lot differently against the Bills after they traded for him than before they traded for him. You saw teams give him a lot more looks, and that indirectly led to Khalil Shakir improving. And if Keon Coleman had never been injured, he would have definitely improved as well. So I think the idea of
Mm.
I would love to see them bring Amari Cooper back on a more team friendly based deal because of just what he was able to do for the offense. And you have a room at that point, then Amari Cooper's still your one. You probably have Shakir as your two, and then Josh Palmer as your three, most likely, if you re signed Amari Cooper. But I would still rather them sign Calais Campbell than Amari Cooper. But it all depends on what the free agency plan is for the Bills. But I did promise that there was a signing that I would love to see made that would absolutely break not just the internet, but would probably break the city of Buffalo, like break everybody's brains. Like, why did this happen? What are we doing? What is going on here? Are you absolutely ready for this one, Paul? Because I'm about to break your brain too.
Ready for it? Let's go.
The Bills are going to re-sign Stephon Diggs. Could you imagine if you wake up one morning, you open your phone and you see an Adam Schefter tweet that says the Bills have signed wide receiver Stephon Diggs to another contract, and you just go, "What have we
That would
done?"
be that would be the equivalent
Could
of
you
the Luka
imagine?
Doncic trade.
No,
Like,
it
you'd
would not.
think that's
No, it
fake.
would not.
You
Nuh-uh.
you'd think that's
You would think it is fake.
1000% fake.
No, no, no. I
It
agree to
would
that,
be.
but no, you can't compare that to the Doncic trade. That would literally be us trading Josh Allen for someone like
Well,
Justin
you
Herbert.
compare it as in the fact that everyone first thought the Doncic trade was fake. So
That
you just
was
compare
fake.
you
And then we looked
compare
at it and
it's
went, "Wait, how
apples
is
to
this
oranges,
real?"
but it's you got
Mhm.
you compare it to that. It's
Oh,
apples to
yeah.
oranges, yes, but
I mean, at the same time, I would the chaos on Bill's Twitter would just be glorious. Like, I wanna
that
see
would
that
be
happen
crazy.
just because of the chaos. Everybody's gonna look at this and go, "Wait, we did what? Why did we do that?" I wanna see it just because that would be hilarious. You know what? Actually, I have another idea for you, Paul. So,
All right, make this one quick because I gotta get mine.
I am. There's also you know how I said earlier that I didn't want the Bills to look at Joey Bosa? There's another
Okay.
player I don't want him to look at either, and that's the, edge rusher Azeez Ojulari. And I know he's good, but do you remember what you remember how dirty he was last season?
Okay.
We don't need that. I don't want a player
Okay.
like that because you're never gonna get playing time out of him because he's gonna do
Uh,
something stupid. He's gonna get into a big fight with somebody like you remember what he did to Trevor Lawrence. He'll wind up doing the same
true.
thing. There
I
you're
get
gonna
it.
he's gonna yeah, I mean, you're gonna pay for a guy that's never gonna see the field because he's just out here trying to fight people. So
Mm,
no. I
okay.
see I see a subsect of Bills fans want the guy, and I'm just like, stop it. Look at what he did last year. Look how hated he was. Don't do
Well,
it.
okay. This goes perfectly into mine because Aziz was on the target list here.
Oh
He's
yeah, nuh-uh.
24 years old. He's
Yeah.
24 years old right now. He's going to be 25. And you can current according to Spot Track, you can get him for about 7.6 million a year. This guy had six sacks in 2024. That is four and a half. That is about three and a half. About right around three and a half more than what he had in 2023. Also, Aziz wins at the line. I mean, at one point last year in uh 18 defensive snaps here. I'm just trying to pull up this article right here that would tell me the in 18 pass rushing snaps, he had a 23.5% win rate. That is setting the edge. And that's what the Bills need is guys that just win at the line and get to the quarterback. And you can get that for a cheap price for a 24-year-old that's almost going to be 25. You sign that on the dotted line instantly. And I think that's kind of the part here that you're kind of missing. I get it. There's some sort of attitude problem that you see in Ojulari that kind of scares you away.
Mhm.
But I think one guy that has a little bit of an attitude tick on him isn't going to destroy your locker room. And especially a guy will probably be wanting to ask for a little bit more money, 17 and a half, sorry, $7.5 million for a premier edge rusher in this league. I mean, look at what Miles Garrett and Max Crosby are getting at their age. They're getting at least triple what Aziz would be getting now, and that would be even go look at Josh Sweat, almost 20 a year. Ojulari's getting at least half that at 7.6 million a year, according to Spot Track. So that would be a steal for the Bills, according to the rest of the edge market right now. And I will end on this note: get your get your cornerback too. I think that's important heading into the draft is getting cornerback number 2. If the Bills don't want to get a Ojulari and you don't want a Ojulari, hence Asante Samuel Jr. I mean,
Please.
he's going to turn 26 before his early shoulder injury last year. He had 35 PBUs, 6 interceptions in 46 games. He's twitchy, feisty, and he plays on the outside mostly, but he can also play in the inside. You can have him outside, you can have him inside. It is perfect for your Bills, for the Bills cornerback number 2 hole, and he is at a ripe age of 26 years old. So that would be perfect for the Bills. I don't know what his contract per year looks like. I
And
could
he's
probably
also a
pull it up.
former Seminole.
There you go.
You
Now
know what? You
we
just
can
made me
agree
think of
on
this.
something.
You know what? I just thought of something hilarious now. Imagine Bill signed Asante Samuel Jr. in free agency and used their first, second round pick and draft Azure Thomas. Now
There
you
you
have
go.
2 FSU cornerbacks in the secondary with Christian Benford. Oh man, I could die happy. I could
And
absolutely die
Asante would
happy.
be getting about 11.5 million according to Spot Track. So it's not a bad contract whatsoever for a 26 for a guy that's going to be 26 in 2025. So that's perfect for the Bills. Those are two of my guys that I feel like,
You know,
they're kind of like my 1-2 right now.
I'm
Uh
actually interested that you gave 2 defensive players. I thought you were gonna be someone that would have said someone like, an offensive player, like another wide receiver. So, I'm
the
fairly
wide
interested.
receiver pool the wide receiver pool is kind of bleak right now.
It
I
really
think
is.
it's not a good free agent pool for wide receivers. It wasn't
It's
like what
not.
it was last year. So I think the Bills, if you transition this into after free agency, you think about, a little draft teaser here. The Bills could possibly take wide receiver round 1. I know there's a lot of people against that. I'm not. For one to say I'm not
You're
against
probably one of
taking
the
wide
only
receiver
ones that I've
round 1.
seen that is for getting a wide receiver in round 1. Most of the people that
Like
I've talked to don't want it, and for very good reason.
I don't mind it. I don't mind taking wide receiver round 1 because how deep the defensive line pool is, and I get it. You want to draft a super elite guy round 1, and I'm totally for that. I'm not saying I'm against it, but you look at the wide receiver pool in free agency, it's kind of bleak. It's kind of meh. There's nothing really you kind of can dip your toes into. You get Josh Palmer on a really good deal. The Bills got to do more at the wide receiver position. And, the wide receiver class is good to about the end of the second round. So if the Bills want to go defensive line, grab that stud in the first round, and then go get guys like Noel, Royals, or Harris, perfect.
Mhm.
That would be your perfect 1-2 punch in any way you want to think about it, wide receiver or defensive line first. They're
Trey
both
Harris.
interchangeable
I
to
think
me.
that's right. Trey Harris, that's his name?
Trey Harris.
Yeah, I've been looking at his tape a little bit, and I'd be down. I really would be.
Yeah.
If you made it a later round pick, absolutely, I would love it. But
He will go anywhere between the two Bills' two second round picks. Well, I mean
mhm,
they're basically back to back. So
exactly.
anywhere for probably 10-ish picks above our first two, where our second round pick is, I would think is his range. I mean, depends how the board falls. Maybe he dips into the third round, but the Bills don't have a third, so you would take Trey Harris somewhere in the second round. I mean, if you don't move up in the first round for a wide receiver and you take a defensive lineman first round, then you can go move up for Trey Harris in the second round. There's a lot of flexibility with the Bills with
Wait,
10 picks,
wait. What did you say we didn't have a pick in? What round?
the third.
Am I crazy or am I a year behind? I thought we had one.
No,
Am
we
I
don't have a
stupid?
third this year.
Okay, so I am stupid. Okay, got it. We've got 2 seconds though. A first
Yeah.
and 2 seconds.
first 2 seconds, we have a couple of fourths, fifths, and we have a lot. We have we have three sixth round picks. So we have one in the first, two in the second, two in the fourth, two in the
Oh
fifth,
yeah,
three in the sixth.
there we
We
are. I
don't
see
have
it
a
now.
seventh or a third.
Okay, you know what? I am actually very much okay with not having a third round pick this year because I feel like maybe we can take that first rounder, that second rounder, that first of the second rounders, maybe the second one, put in a nice little package to move up in the first round, get a guy like Kenneth Grant, make my life. But even if we stay
Yeah,
put, I feel like there's going to be a lot of really nice options for the Bills. And if we walk out of here with Azare Thomas, that would also just be incredible. I just don't know how we're gonna get him at 56. I feel like you'd have to probably trade up into a little higher into the second round for him. But man, getting Azare Thomas alongside Christian Benford would just be elite. But you know
it would
what,
be.
Paul? We might need to have a Connor's takes to just talk nothing but draft because I have been thinking about this for a little while, even during the early portion of racing season, and being very, very upset because Christopher Bell is winning all the time again, 3 races in a row now. I've still been looking at, the Bills draft class, potential draft class. The Bills actually have me more interested in the offseason than I've ever been interested in the offseason in a long time. So I've been looking at it quite a bit, and I think that we've got a lot of moves that we could and probably should make.
Yeah,
Azare Thomas is just a guy that if we draft him, it's just like when we drafted Keon Coleman. Trust me, we're going to have a player on our hands. You guys did with Keon, and until he got injured, we had a player on our hands. Trust the
yeah.
guy who's watched his FSU players.
As we go on further into the off season, there will be a lot more draft content to talk about throughout each of these shows as we get closer and closer to NFL Draft Day. We had a recurring guest last year. His name was Dean, so
Oh, I love Dean.
hopefully he would be willing to, come back, kind of get his takes on a lot of things. He has this spreadsheet that he did last year for
Hmm.
the Bills Mafia fan base, and he still does it to this. He still
Oh yeah.
does it this year. So be interesting to where he thinks and aligns, where he thinks and aligns. Where the Bills' interest will be in current draft prospects.
Hmm.
Between now and next week, we'll see what the Bills do. Do they make another signing? Do they not? Is their focus solely draft based now? Is there a James Cook or a Christian Benford extension? Only
It
time will
mhm.
tell.
It should be
But
an if on Christian Benford, or no, no, no. It should be an if on James Cook, but a win on Christian Benford.
yeah,
That's how we need
one of
to be.
those.
That's how we need to approach this. It is a win. We extend Christian Benford because you know it's coming.
It's coming one of these days. Whether it's tonight, Wednesday night, Thursday night, maybe
Yeah,
any time between now and next show.
it's going to be
But until
funny.
then,
It's going to be funny, Paul. Right as you hit that button to end the stream, there's good or the end the show. There's going to be a pop up from Adam Schefter that says the Bills have extended cornerback Christian Benford. But you know what? Seeing as this is the end of the show, you know, everybody make sure you go follow us, follow the show's account, but definitely follow us. Paul and I have our Twitter handles in our bios there on the screen. We'll be posting plenty of thoughts that we have across free agency and the draft. But I'm going to end on this very peculiar note. Can we re-sign Sewell? Is this an option? I know
no,
Sewell
but
likes
go
to.
Bills.
I know Sewell tweets on Twitter all the time. Can this man see that clip and sign back with the Bills? That'd be nice. But yeah,
On that
I had to
note,
end it on
thanks for
that note.
watching and go Bills.
Hmm. Go Bills.